The sound of shattering glass jolted me awake. My heart hammered against my ribs as angry voices echoed through our two-story colonial. I glanced at my phone, 2:17 a.m. This wasn't their usual fighting hour. My name is Eliora, but everyone calls me Eli. At 17, I'd gotten pretty good at reading the rhythm of my parents' arguments. This one felt different. More final somehow. How long? My father's voice cracked with an emotion I'd never heard from him before. How long have you been lying to me? I crept to my bedroom door, pressing my ear against the cool wood. Mom's response was too quiet to make out, but Dad's bitter laugh cut through the silence like a knife. 12 years, Blythe? Our entire marriage has been built on lies. My stomach dropped. 12 years. The same age as my half-sister Zara. She was sleeping over at a friend's house tonight, thankfully missing whatever storm was breaking over our family. James, please, Mom pleaded. I never meant to. To what? To destroy everything? To make a fool of me? Another crash, followed by the sound of keys jingling. I can't even look at you right now. Heavy footsteps thundered down the stairs. I rushed to my window, watching as Dad stormed out to his car. The engine roared to life, tires squealing against wet pavement as he peeled away into the darkness. Mom stood in the doorway, her silhouette small and defeated in the porch light. I should have gone downstairs. Should have demanded answers. Instead, I crawled back into bed, pulling my covers up to my chin like I was still a little kid who could hide from monsters under blankets. Sleep didn't come. The next morning, everything changed. 2 police officers stood in our living room while Mom collapsed onto the couch, her face buried in her hands. Their words blurred together. Wet roads, sharp turn, no guardrail. Dad's car had been found at the bottom of Miller's Ridge. Mrs. Wyndham, one officer said gently, I'm so sorry, but your husband didn't survive the crash. The world tilted sideways. I gripped the door frame, my knees threatening to buckle. Mom's sobs filled the room, but all I could hear was Dad's voice from last night, raw with betrayal. His final words in our house haunting me, I can't even look at you right now. Hours passed in a fog. Relatives started arriving, aunts, uncles, family, friends. Everyone speaking in hushed tones, offering casseroles and condolences. But Grandma and Grandpa Wyndham, Dad's parents, were noticeably absent. When I asked Mom why, she just shook her head and said they were traveling. Late that afternoon, I found myself in Dad's study, breathing in the familiar scent of old books and coffee. His reading glasses still sat on his desk, next to a half-finished crossword puzzle. A photo of us caught my eye, Dad teaching me to fish when I was 12, both of us grinning at the camera with matching sunburned noses. Eli? Mom's voice startled me. She stood in the doorway, eyes red and puffy. Grady's coming over to help with arrangements. Grady Bellamy. Mom's friend from work who'd been spending more and more time at our house lately. Something cold settled in my chest as pieces started clicking into place. Did Dad know? The words slipped out before I could stop them. About you and Grady? Mom flinched like I'd slapped her. This isn't the time, Eliora. But it was exactly the time. Dad was gone, and his last moments alive had been filled with anger and betrayal. I turned back to the photo, unable to look at her. When will it be time, Mom? When you're ready to admit what really happened last night? She didn't answer. Her footsteps retreated down the hall, leaving me alone with Dad's ghost and questions that would haunt me for months to come. One thing was certain, nothing would ever be the same again. 6 months after Dad's funeral, Mom married Grady in our backyard. I watched from my bedroom window as they exchanged vows under the maple tree where Dad had built my childhood swing. The same tree he'd promised to hang fairy lights in for my graduation party next spring. Mom wore a cream-colored sundress and a smile I didn't recognize. Zara scattered rose petals, beaming at her role as flower girl. The small gathering of guests, mostly Grady's friends and family, applauded as they kissed. No one seemed to notice or care that Dad's parents weren't there. That half of our family was missing. Eli? Zara's voice pulled me from my thoughts. She stood in my doorway, still in her pale pink dress. Mom wants you to come down for pictures. I'm not feeling well, I said, The same excuse I'd used to avoid the ceremony. Maybe later. Zara's face fell. But we're family now. Grady says. Grady isn't my father. The words came out sharper than I intended. Zara flinched and guilt twisted in my stomach. None of this was her fault. Sorry, I softened my tone. I just need some time, okay? She nodded and disappeared downstairs, where laughter and music drifted up through the floorboards. I turned back to my window, watching as Grady led Mom in their first dance. His hand rested possessively on her lower back, and something in his expression made my skin crawl. Later that night, after the guests had gone and Zara was asleep, I crept down to the kitchen for water. Voices from the living room stopped me cold. We need to discuss what to do about Elira, Grady was saying. Her attitude is affecting Zara. She's grieving, Mom replied, but her defense sounded weak. It's only been 6 months. It's been long enough. Grady's voice hardened. We're a family now, Blythe. Either she accepts that, or we need to consider other options. What do you mean, other options? My sister's running that boarding school in Vermont. They have openings for the spring semester. The glass slipped from my hand, shattering on the tile floor. Silence fell in the living room. Eli? Mom called out. Is that you? I didn't answer. Instead, I ran back upstairs, my bare feet silent on the carpet. Behind me, I heard their muffled argument resume. The next morning, I woke to find boxes stacked in the hallway. Grady was directing movers, pointing out which furniture stayed and which went. What's happening? I asked Mom, who was supervising from the doorway. Grady's moving in properly now, she said, not meeting my eyes. We're making space for his things. I watched as they dismantled Dad's study, packing away his books and awards. His presence being erased piece by piece. When they reached for the fishing photo on his desk, I snapped. That's mine, I said, snatching it before the mover could wrap it in paper. Eli, Mom started, but Grady cut her off. Let her have it, he said smoothly. She'll need something for her dorm room, after all. My blood ran cold. So they'd already decided. That afternoon, I found Dad's old laptop buried in one of the boxes headed for storage. I smuggled it to my room, desperate for any connection to him. When I powered it on, a document was still open, an email draft dated the night he died. Mavis, it began. I know why you've been trying to warn me about Blythe. Tonight confirmed everything. I need your help protecting. The message cut off there. My hands shook as I read it again. Grandma had tried to warn him? About what? A knock at my door made me quickly close the laptop. Grady stood there, his smile not reaching his eyes. Family meeting downstairs, he said. We need to discuss your future. I nodded, my mind racing. Dad's unfinished email felt like a key to a door I didn't even know existed. Whatever Grandma Mavis had tried to tell him, whatever truth she knew, I had to find out. But first, I needed to stop them from shipping me off to Vermont. The family meeting about Vermont never happened. Instead, I spent the night digging through Dad's laptop, looking for any connection to my grandparents. My search led me to a password-protected folder labeled Family Matters. After 3 tries, I cracked it my birthday, followed by Zara's. Inside, I found dozens of emails between Dad and Grandma Mavis, dating back 12 years. The most recent ones made my stomach churn. James, the DNA test results confirm what we suspected, Grandma had written. You need to confront Blythe about Zara. And about Grady. This deception has gone on long enough. The timestamp showed Dad had read this email the morning before he died. A soft knock interrupted my reading. Eli? Zara's voice came through the door. Can I come in? I quickly closed the laptop. Sure. She slipped inside, clutching her pillow. I had a bad dream. Can I sleep here? Looking at her now, knowing what I knew, made my heart ache. She wasn't just my half-sister, she was Grady's daughter. Dad had raised her believing she was his, while Grady and Mom kept their secret. Of course, I said, moving over. As she settled in beside me, I noticed she was wearing Dad's old college sweatshirt as a nightgown. The sight made me want to cry. Eli, she whispered in the darkness. Why doesn't Grady want you to stay? My breath caught. What do you mean? I heard him talking to Mom. He said you're too much like Dad, that it's not healthy for anyone. Before I could respond, footsteps creaked in the hallway. The door opened, revealing Grady's silhouette. Zara, his voice was tight. What are you doing in here? I had a nightmare. Back to your room. Now. She scrambled out of bed, shooting me an apologetic look before scurrying past him. Grady lingered in the doorway. We need to establish some boundaries, he said. Zara's impressionable. She doesn't need to be influenced by your attitude. You mean she doesn't need to remember Dad? The words felt dangerous in my mouth, but I couldn't stop them. Or is there something else you're worried about? His expression shifted, something cold flickering behind his eyes. What exactly are you implying? Nothing, I said, but my hand instinctively moved to cover Dad's laptop. Just wondering why you're so eager to send me away. He stepped into my room, closing the door behind him. Listen carefully, Eliora. Your mother and I are trying to build something here. A fresh start. If you can't be part of that, there are other options. Like Vermont? Like wherever necessary. His gaze fell on the laptop. What's that? Schoolwork. On your father's computer? He moved closer. Hand it over. No. I clutched it to my chest. This isn't a request. He reached for it, but I scrambled backward. Get out of my room. The door burst open. Mom stood there, looking between us with wide eyes. What's going on? Your daughter's been going through James's personal files, Grady said. Who knows what she's found? Mom's face paled. Eli, give me the laptop. Why? Afraid of what else I might discover. I opened it, hands shaking. Like these emails from Grandma Mavis? Or the DNA test results. The color drained from Mom's face. Grady's hands clenched into fists. How long were you going to keep lying? I demanded. Dad knew, didn't he? That night, when he left, he finally figured it out. About you too. About Zara. Enough. Grady's shout made me flinch. Blythe, handle this. Now. Mom stepped forward, tears in her eyes. Sweetheart, please. It's complicated. No, it's really not. I slammed the laptop shut. Dad died thinking his whole life was a lie. And you're still lying, aren't you? To Zara, to everyone. Vermont isn't optional anymore, Grady cut in. You're leaving next week. I looked at Mom, waiting for her to defend me. She just stood there, silent tears running down her face. Fine, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. But first, I'm calling Grandma Mavis. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Mom's gasp told me everything I needed to know. There were more secrets to uncover, and my grandparents held the key to all of them. Finding Grandma Mavis's number wasn't hard. It was still in Dad's phone contacts. What was hard was working up the courage to call while Grady and Mom were downstairs, probably plotting my exile to Vermont. I paced my room, phone clutched in my sweaty palm. The sound of Zara practicing piano drifted up through the floorboards, the same melody she'd been working on since Dad taught it to her last year. The thought of leaving her behind made my chest ache. Finally, I pressed call. 3 rings. 4. Then, hello? Her voice was exactly as I remembered, warm and strong. Grandma? Silence. Then a sharp intake of breath. Elira? Is it really you? Yeah. My voice cracked. I found Dad's emails. About the DNA test. About Mom and... Where are you? She cut in, urgency replacing warmth. Are you at home? Yes, but... Listen carefully, sweetheart. Don't tell anyone you called me. Your grandfather and I are 3 hours away. We can be there by... The line went dead. I spun around to find Grady in my doorway, his hand on my room's phone jack. Calling hours are over, he said, pocketing the cable. You can't keep me from talking to my grandparents. Actually, I can. He stepped closer. Your mother signed the boarding school paperwork this morning. You're leaving Sunday. That's in 2 days. Better start packing. I pushed past him into the hallway, racing downstairs to find Mom. She was in the kitchen, methodically loading the dishwasher like everything was normal. You signed the papers? I demanded. Without even talking to me? She wouldn't meet my eyes. It's for the best, Eli. You need a fresh start away from all this. All what? The truth. The past, Grady said from behind me. Which is where it needs to stay. The piano music stopped abruptly. Zara appeared in the doorway, her face pale. You're leaving? No, I said, just as Mom said yes. But why? Zara's voice trembled. Is it because of me? Because I told you about what Grady said. Zara, Grady's tone carried a warning. Go to your room. No. She moved closer to me. I don't want Eli to go. I saw something dangerous flash in Grady's eyes. He stepped toward Zara, but I moved between them. Don't, I said quietly. Don't you dare try to intimidate her like you do everyone else. Grady, Mom started, but he held up his hand. You want to know why your sister's leaving? He asked Zara. Show her the emails, Eli. Tell her everything you found. About her real father. About. Stop. Mom's shout made us all jump. A glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor. In the silence that followed, I could hear her ragged breathing. Mom? Zara's voice was small. What's he talking about? I looked at my sister, really looked at her. She had Grady's eyes. How had I never noticed before? The truth sat like poison on my tongue, but I couldn't bring myself to say it. Nothing, I said finally. He's talking about nothing. Grady smiled, cold and triumphant. He knew he had me cornered. I could tell the truth and destroy Zara's world, or I could leave quietly and protect her from it. I'll go pack, I said, my voice hollow. But as I turned to leave, I caught sight of Dad's reflection in the kitchen window. No, not Dad. Grandfather August, standing on our back porch with Grandma Mavis beside him. They must have already been on their way when I called. Grady followed my gaze and cursed. Mom dropped another glass. Zara, I said quickly, remember how Dad always said the truth sets us free? She nodded. Well, I think it's time for some truth. All of it. The back door opened, and my grandparents stepped into our kitchen like avenging angels. Grandma Mavis took one look at me and opened her arms. I ran to her without hesitation, leaving chaos erupting behind me. Grandma Mavis's kitchen smelled like cinnamon and safety. I sat at her familiar oak table, watching steam rise from my tea while Grandfather August paced behind me. We'd left chaos at my house, Mom crying, Grady threatening legal action, and Zara locked in her room, refusing to speak to anyone. Your father suspected for years, Grandma said, sliding a worn leather journal across the table. But he couldn't prove anything until he found this in Blythe's desk last spring. The journal was Mom's. Inside, detailed entries chronicled her relationship with Grady, starting long before I was born. Before she even met Dad. He was going to confront them that night, Grandfather August said, his voice heavy. We begged him to wait, to let us help him gather more evidence for the divorce. Evidence? I looked up from the journal. Evidence of what? Grandma exchanged a look with Grandfather. Your father discovered some irregularities in his company's accounts. Large sums of money being transferred to offshore accounts. I don't understand. Grady was your father's financial advisor before he married your mother, Grandfather explained. He'd been embezzling funds for years, using your mother's position as company secretary to cover his tracks. The room tilted sideways. Dad's accident. Might not have been an accident at all, Grandma finished softly. A sharp knock at the front door made us all jump. Through the window, I saw Mom's car in the driveway. I'll handle this, Grandfather said, moving toward the door. Wait. I stood up. I want to talk to her. Eli. She owes me the truth. All of it. Mom looked smaller somehow, standing in Grandma's living room. Her eyes were red, her hands twisting together nervously. Where's Grady? I asked. At home with Zara. She swallowed hard. He doesn't know I'm here. Like Dad didn't know about you and Grady all those years? She flinched. I never meant for any of this to happen. Grady. He can be very persuasive when he wants something. Like Dad's money? Or his life. That's not, I didn't know about the money until after. She trailed off, tears spilling down her cheeks. When James confronted me that night, I panicked. I called Grady, told him everything. He said he'd handle it, but I never thought. You never thought he'd actually kill Dad? My voice cracked. Or you just never thought anyone would figure it out? Eli, please. I know I've made terrible mistakes, but I'm still your mother. No. The word came out sharp as glass. My mother died the night Dad did. I just didn't know it until now. A sound from the hallway made us turn. Zara stood there, tears streaming down her face. She must have followed Mom. Is it true? She whispered. Did he kill James? Mom reached for her, but Zara backed away. Sweetheart, it's complicated. Stop lying. Zara screamed. Everyone just stop lying. She ran to me, wrapping her arms around my waist like she used to when she was little. Despite everything, she was still my sister. Blood didn't matter. Dad had taught us that love was stronger than DNA. What do we do now? Zara asked, her voice muffled against my shirt. I looked at my grandparents, then at Mom, who seemed to have aged years and minutes. The journal on the table held enough evidence to destroy Grady, but using it would mean destroying what was left of our family too. We tell the truth, I said finally. All of it. To the police, to everyone. Grady will never let that happen, Mom whispered. He'll what? Grandfather's voice was steel. Kill someone else? Try to send Eli away? We have evidence now, Blythe. Real evidence. My phone buzzed, a text from Grady. Come home now. Or everyone learns what really happened the night your father died. I showed it to the others. Mom went pale. He's bluffing, she said, but her voice shook. Maybe, I replied, already grabbing my keys. But I'm done running from the truth. Grandma caught my arm. You're not going alone. I looked at my sister, still clinging to me, then at the journal that held our father's death warrant. No, I agreed. We're all going. It's time to finish this. The house was dark when we pulled into the driveway. Too dark. Even the porch light was off, which Mom never allowed. Grandfather August insisted on calling the police, but I knew we couldn't wait. Every minute felt like another chance for Grady to destroy evidence, to bury the truth even deeper. He's expecting me, I said, gripping Mom's journal in my hands. Just me. Absolutely not. Grandma Mavis started, but I cut her off. Dad died trying to protect this family. I won't let that be for nothing. Before anyone could stop me, I was out of the car and up the front steps. The door was unlocked. Inside, the house felt wrong, like walking into a familiar room where all the furniture had been shifted slightly left. Grady. My voice echoed in the darkness. In here. His voice came from Dad's old study. I found him sitting at Dad's desk, illuminated by a single lamp. Dad's laptop was open in front of him, and beside it sat a familiar object that made my blood run cold, Dad's phone. The one the police said they never found at the crash site. Wondering how I got this? Grady's smile didn't reach his eyes. Amazing what you can retrieve from a ravine if you know where to look. You went back that night, I said, to clean up evidence. Smart girl. Just like your father. He gestured to the chair across from him. Sit. I remained standing. Where's Zara? Safe. Away from all this mess you're creating. He leaned forward. You know, James made the same choice you did, choosing truth over family. Look where that got him. You murdered him. I protected what was mine. His voice hardened. Like I'm going to do right now. The front door opened. Mom's voice called out, followed by Grandma Mavis's. Grady's expression darkened. I told you to come alone. I did. I held up the journal. And I brought what you really want. His eyes fixed on it. Your mother's little diary. James was so proud of himself for finding it. It has everything. The affair, the money transfers, all of it. Hand it over. I took a step closer to his desk. Tell me what happened that night first. The whole truth. He studied me for a long moment, then shrugged. Your father was going to ruin everything. The life I'd built, the future I'd planned. He called that night, said he was going to the police. I couldn't let that happen. So you followed him. I tried talking sense into him first. When that failed, he spread his hands. Sometimes accidents are necessary. Footsteps approached the study. I needed to keep him talking, keep him distracted. And Mom? Did she know? Blythe knows what she needs to know. Just like you're going to forget what you think you know, unless you want Zara to grow up without both her father and her sister. The threat hung in the air between us. I thought of Zara, already losing one father, now learning the truth about another. The journal felt heavy in my hands. "You're right," I said quietly. "Sometimes we have to protect what's ours." I held out the journal. As Grady reached for it, I let it fall. In his moment of distraction, I lunged for Dad's phone on the desk. But Grady was faster. His hand clamped around my wrist, twisting until pain shot up my arm. The phone clattered to the floor as he yanked me forward, his other hand going to my throat. I tried to be reasonable, he snarled. "Tried to give you a chance to be smart about this." "Let her go." Mom's scream came from the doorway. Everything happened at once. Grady spun me around, using me as a shield. Grandfather August appeared behind Mom, holding something that glinted in the dim light. And there, in the corner of the room, stood Zara. She must have been hiding there the whole time, recording everything on her phone. "It's over, Grady," I managed to say through his chokehold. "The truth's already out." His grip tightened. "Then I have nothing left to lose, do I?" The last thing I saw was Mom lunging forward, terror in her eyes, as Grady dragged me backward toward the window. Then everything went black. I woke to the steady beep of hospital monitors and the sensation of someone holding my hand. For a moment, I thought it was Dad, like when I had my appendix out at 12. But when my eyes focused, I saw Grandma Mavis, her face etched with worry. "Welcome back, sweetheart," she whispered. The events in Dad's study came rushing back. "Grady is in custody." Grandfather August stepped into view. "Zara's video and your father's phone provided enough evidence. The police are reopening James's case." My throat felt raw where Grady's hands had been. "Where's Zara?" "Here." She appeared at my bedside, eyes red from crying. "I'm so sorry, Eli. I heard him on the phone earlier, planning to send you away. I knew something was wrong, so I hid in the study and recorded everything. You saved us all," I told her, squeezing her hand. A commotion in the hallway drew our attention. Mom burst in, followed by 2 police detectives. "5 minutes, one of them said. "Then we need your official statement, Mrs. Bellamy." "It's Wyndham," Mom corrected sharply. "I'm going back to Wyndham." She approached my bed cautiously, like I might shatter. "Eli, I need to tell you something. About your father's trust fund. The one he set up for my college?" "No." She pulled out a familiar envelope, the one I'd seen in Dad's desk the night he died. "This is his letter to you. The one Grady tried to destroy. It explains everything." With shaking hands, I opened it. Dad's familiar handwriting filled the page. "My dearest Eli, if you're reading this, then my suspicions about Grady were correct. I've documented everything, the embezzlement, the threats, the affair. But more importantly, I've secured your future. The trust fund isn't just for college. It's everything I had, transferred to an account only you and your grandparents can access. I knew Grady would come after me once he discovered what I'd done. But I couldn't let him steal your future like he stole our family's trust. Protect Zara. She's innocent in all this, and she'll need her big sister more than ever. And Eli? Remember what I always told you about truth and justice? Sometimes they come at a terrible price. But they're worth fighting for. All my love. Dad." I looked up at Mom, who was crying silently. "You knew about this letter?" "Grady found it first," she admitted. He used it to convince me to marry him. Said he'd destroy everything, the evidence, the trust fund, our family, if I didn't help him cover up what happened to James. So you chose him over the truth? Over Dad's justice? I chose what I thought would protect you and Zara." Her voice cracked. "I was wrong. So terribly wrong." The detective stepped back in. "Mrs. Wyndham, it's time." Mom straightened her shoulders. "I'm ready to tell the truth. All of it." "Wait." I caught her hand. "Dad's letter. He wanted justice, but he also wanted us to heal. To be a family again. How can we? After everything?" "By choosing truth this time," I said. "Together." Zara moved closer, taking Mom's other hand. For a moment, we stood connected, 3 generations of women choosing truth over fear. "Mr. and Mrs. Wyndham," I looked at my grandparents. Will you help us? Grandma Mavis wiped her eyes. That's all we've ever wanted, dear heart. The detective cleared his throat. There's one more thing. We found something else at the house. A recording on James's phone. From that night, my heart stopped. Dad's last moments, preserved in digital memory. Do you want to hear it? The detective asked. I looked at my family, broken but healing, fractured but not destroyed. Dad's words echoed in my mind. Sometimes truth and justice come at a terrible price. But they're worth fighting for. Yes, I said firmly. We need to hear everything. Because that's what Dad taught me, that truth, no matter how painful, was the first step toward healing. And we had a lot of healing left to do. 1 year later, I stood in front of Dad's grave, brushing autumn leaves from his headstone. The trial had ended last week. Grady got 20 years for Dad's murder, with Mom receiving immunity for her testimony. The recording from Dad's phone had captured everything, including Grady's confession before he forced Dad's car off the road. Ready? Zara appeared beside me, carrying a bouquet of Dad's favorite sunflowers. She lived with me and our grandparents now, her choice after Mom started therapy and moved into a small apartment across town. We were all healing, but at different paces, in different places. Almost. I pulled out Dad's old journal, the one I'd found hidden in his desk after the trial. I want to read him something first. Zara nodded, settling cross-legged on the grass. I opened to the last entry, dated the morning of his death. My greatest fear isn't dying. It's leaving my girls without showing them that love is stronger than blood, that truth matters more than comfort. And that family isn't just who we're born to, but who we choose to become. He was right, Zara said softly. About all of it. A familiar car pulled up to the cemetery gates. Mom, right on time for our weekly visit. These meetings were still awkward, filled with careful conversations and tentative steps toward forgiveness. But we kept showing up, week after week, choosing truth over comfort, just like Dad taught us. Girls? Grandma Mavis called from behind us. Your mother's here. I closed the journal, tucking it back into my bag next to the acceptance letter from Dad's alma mater. The trust fund he'd set up would cover my tuition, but it was his words, not his money, that had guided me here. Mom approached slowly, carrying her own flowers. Her hair was graying at the temples now, and grief had etched permanent lines around her eyes. But there was something lighter about her these days, like setting down a heavy secret had allowed her to stand straighter. I found something, she said, holding out an envelope. In my old diary. Inside was a photo I'd never seen, Dad teaching me to write my name, both of us laughing as I scribbled backwards letters across his legal pad. On the back, he'd written, Eli's first story, about a family of birds who flew in different directions, but always found their way home. I was cleaning out the storage unit, Mom explained. Thought you might want it for your dorm room. My throat tightened. Next week, I'd be heading to college, leaving behind the cemetery, this town, all these ghosts. But not the truth, never that. Thanks, I managed. Then, surprising us both, I hugged her. Zara joined us, then Grandma Mavis and Grandfather August. We stood there, this patchwork family held together by choice rather than obligation, by truth rather than comfort. Later that night, as I packed my room, I found one last surprise, a sealed envelope that had fallen behind my desk. Dad's handwriting again, but this time addressed to both my daughters. Zara sat beside me as I read. My dear girls, by the time you read this, you'll understand that family isn't always what it seems. But here's what I know for certain. Love doesn't care about DNA. Truth doesn't bend to convenience. And strength isn't about never falling. It's about who helps you stand back up. Eli, protect your sister's heart. Zara, guard your sister's spirit. Together, you're stronger than any secret, any lie, any storm. And remember, sometimes the hardest paths lead us exactly where we need to be. All my love. Dad. I looked at Zara, this sister who wasn't my sister by blood, but was my sister in all the ways that mattered. She smiled, tears in her eyes. He knew, she whispered. He knew all along, and he loved us anyway. No, I corrected gently. He loved us completely. Because that was Dad's final lesson that love, like truth, doesn't need qualifiers. It simply is. And sometimes, that's enough to build a future on.